Welcome back, lovely ladies. If you want to become the woman of your dreams, make sure to hit that subscribe button and like this video. And join our Patreon for even more exclusive content. Now, let's dive into today's story.
I woke up that morning with the familiar gray light of dawn slipping through the blinds, my mind lingering in that foggy place between sleep and waking. It took only a few moments for my heart to tighten with worry. I had hoped that a night's rest would soothe the aching thoughts in my head, but the events of the previous day crashed back with unrelenting force. Everything in my world had toppled. My husband, the man I had married with hope and love, was gone in a way I could never have anticipated, and in his place stood someone called Vanessa. Those simple facts formed a knot of confusion and anger in my chest, and no matter how deeply I breathed, I couldn't loosen it. I wanted to blame someone, so I blamed Tiffany, our daughter. She was 22, an age where she was supposed to know better. Perhaps it wasn't entirely fair to hold her responsible for all this chaos, but it was easier to accuse her than to stare at the uncertain direction my life was heading. If she hadn't convinced her father to enter that contest, a contest I will never, as long as I live, understand, maybe our family would have been spared this disaster. The lead up to that contest now felt surreal. It was only a few weeks earlier, on a Sunday afternoon, that Tiffany showed up in the living room with her boyfriend Logan. They had some flyers in hand, bright glossy posters with flamboyant lettering. My husband Mason was reading the newspaper, and I was tidying up the mail, half listening to the conversation. "This is going to be so fun," Tiffany chirped, waving one of the flyers in front of Logan's face. "You have to do it with me, please." Logan, an awkward but well-meaning young man, squirmed on the couch. "I really don't think this is my kind of thing," he said. "I mean, I have no issue with it, but I'm not the sort of person who could stand on a stage dressed in that." He gestured at the ad. A stylized image depicted men dressed in elaborate outfits, clearly competing in some kind of pageant. Their hair was done up, and they wore gowns that shimmered. To me, it all looked like a costume party that had gotten out of hand. Tiffany pouted. "It's not just about the outfit, it's about looking fabulous and enjoying the moment. And anyway, there's a cash prize. We could use it for something practical, like paying off some of our rent, or you could just earn money in a normal way." Mason cut in with a teasing smile. He put down the newspaper, folded it neatly, and looked at Tiffany. "I don't think you can pressure him into it, Tiff." She rolled her eyes. "That's because you've never tried something like this. It's exciting, and I bet you would do great if you had the right look. Any man with some flair could pull it off." Logan caught my eye in a silent plea for help. I shrugged. This was their discussion, and I had no interest in interfering. That's when Mason, always too playful for his own good, smirked. "You know," he said, "if Logan won't do it, maybe I will. It might be fun to see if I can outshine all those other contestants." I gave a short laugh, already returning my attention to the stack of mail. "Sure," I teased. "I'll bet you'd look absolutely lovely in a ball gown." Tiffany's eyes lit up, and she bounced on her heels like an excited child. "Oh, that would be so cool. Daddy, would you actually consider it?" "Relax, Tiff, I'm joking," Mason said. Yet the look on his face told me that part of him wasn't entirely joking. He had that playful streak in him, the one that often led to pranks and silly stunts. "But Dad, think about it," Tiffany continued. "You could do it as a lark, a project. I've been wanting to do a makeover for ages. Please?" Something about the prospect seemed to intrigue him. Before I knew it, Tiffany had laid out a plan. She thought that if she and her dad showed up to the contest with over-the-top outfits, they might actually stand a chance at winning. Her boyfriend, meanwhile, was still fighting the entire idea. I regarded Tiffany carefully, noticing how her enthusiasm bordered on obsession. She wasn't just asking her father to wear a dress for a costume event. She wanted a transformation. I should have spoken up then. I should have said no. But Mason was a grown man, and Tiffany was an adult too. If they wanted to do something silly and harmless, who was I to be the killjoy? Within days, their playful idea escalated. Tiffany insisted that a mere wig wouldn't do. "We need extensions," she said, showing me a photo of men sporting luxurious hair. "And not just a little trim here or there. You have to commit." Mason, always game for an adventure, shrugged. "Sure, why not?" I remember staring in disbelief. "Extensions? Are you serious? You'll hate that." "That's part of the fun," Tiffany said, snapping her gum. "He has to look and act the part. If he's going to do this, he should do it convincingly." "Which means?" I asked, bracing myself. "He needs to live like a woman for a few days," Tiffany declared matter-of-factly. "Spend some time walking in heels, learning to do his makeup, practicing a feminine voice, that kind of thing." I must have made a face because Mason laughed. "Don't worry, honey," he told me. "This is just for the contest. I'm still me." A swirl of discomfort took hold of me, but I pushed it aside. It was temporary, I told myself. It's a silly little hobby they're indulging in. Except it stopped feeling silly when Tiffany announced that Mason needed a waxing appointment, a mani-pedi, eyebrow shaping, and all sorts of expensive cosmetic routines. "Why a blonde?" I asked, eyeing the golden locks Tiffany had selected for him. "You don't have the right coloring for that." "Blondes always stand out," Tiffany insisted. "If we want Dad to make an impression, we have to go all in." To see my husband seated in a salon chair, his dark eyebrows gradually reshaped into sleek, curved arches, his nails coated in a glossy, clear polish, was beyond uncomfortable. Yet he was surprisingly calm about it all. Or perhaps calm isn't the right word. He was keen, enthusiastic even. The stylists exclaimed how great he was going to look, showering compliments that made my skin prickle. I felt overshadowed, lost in the midst of their giggles and praises for my husband's soon-to-be transformation. Tiffany hovered, giving instructions with the confidence of someone who had done her research. When it was all done, Mason stood up, flicking his newly extended blonde hair back. "What do you think?" he asked, voice still deep, but a certain glint in his eye suggested he liked his reflection more than he let on. I was both fascinated and unsettled. I tried to laugh it off. "I think you look ridiculous," I said. But the truth was more complicated. He looked startlingly convincing, at least from a distance and at certain angles. A pang of fear flitted through me. This had gone far beyond a lark. That's when Tiffany came up with an idea for me. She said that if Dad was going to be so feminine, then maybe I should do the opposite. "Wear something that looks kind of edgy," she said. "Like a leather jacket, but with a mini skirt and tights." She grinned. "It'll be a fun photo opportunity." "I'm not sure how that helps him," I responded. "It's not about helping him. It's about making a statement. You two will have matching energy, the reversed outfits. Trust me, it'll be perfect." Her boyfriend Logan just sat there, shifting uncomfortably, while Tiffany laid out the plan for the contest. The transformation for my husband would be completed by Friday night, so that on Saturday, he'd be fully in character. She had an outfit prepared for the big event, a long, flowing evening gown that shimmered with sequins, matching high-heeled pumps, and a pair of breast forms that looked disturbingly real. I tried to talk sense into Mason on Wednesday night. I remember it clearly. We were in the kitchen, finishing dishes. "Isn't this going too far?" I asked him, scrubbing at a pot. He shrugged. "It's a one-time thing. Tiff is excited. I'm curious. Why not? Think of it as an experiment. No harm done." I didn't know how to express the tightness in my chest, the unease that was taking root. I was worried about what people would say. I was also worried about how comfortable Mason seemed with it all. I had never doubted his masculinity before, nor had I considered what it would mean if he enjoyed dressing like a woman. That night I lay in bed, twisting my wedding ring around my finger, unable to quiet my thoughts. Thursday passed in a blur of final outfit alterations, makeup tests, and lessons in walking in heels. I heard Tiffany in the living room teaching Mason how to carry himself with a graceful sway. They giggled a lot. I caught glimpses of them in the hallway mirror, Tiffany adjusting Mason's posture, telling him to keep his shoulders relaxed. My husband in a practice wig, tottering in 3-inch pumps, nearly stumbling but catching himself with a laugh. Their closeness filled me with a strange sense of envy. I felt left out, like a stranger in my own house. Then Friday rolled around, and Tiffany said the time had come to unveil Vanessa. She insisted on calling him that, saying a feminine name was crucial. I stood by the doorway of the living room as Tiffany worked her magic, swirling a makeup brush over Mason's cheeks, painting his lips a soft rose color, and carefully attaching the final touches to his newly extended blonde hair. When he finally stood up, turning around with a girlish flourish, my breath caught. He wore a slim-fitting pencil skirt paired with a silken blouse. The artificial curves of his chest gave him a balanced hourglass figure. The angle of his chin, the arch of his eyebrows, the parted lips all contributed to an image that was alarmingly believable. I felt a chill. This was my husband, and yet not. There was a bright sparkle in his eyes, a boldness in the way he held himself that I had never seen before. "What do you think, honey?" he asked me in a higher pitch than usual. I forced a smile. "You look, very convincing." Tiffany beamed. "We did good, right? You'd never guess that's Dad." Mason winked. "It's all thanks to Tiff." My stomach lurched with an odd mixture of pride for how skilled Tiffany was at this transformation and a deep fear for what it implied. That's when he, or should I say Vanessa, made an announcement that knocked the air out of me. "I'm going to the office," he said cheerily. "I just want to pop in and show the guys what I look like. It'll be funny, like a big reveal." I stared at him, aghast. "Are you serious? You'll get teased mercilessly." He shrugged, picking up a small clutch purse Tiffany had lent him. "Let them tease me. It's all in good fun." Tiffany, brimming with excitement, chimed in. "Yes, go show them what you can do, Dad, or should I say, Vanessa." A flush rose to my cheeks. "This is insane," I whispered. "You can't be serious." But he was already halfway to the door. I watched in disbelief as he stepped outside, the click of his heels echoing on the driveway. Tiffany followed him to the car, presumably to see him off, and I was left standing in the empty living room, heart pounding. The rest of that day felt like I was trapped in a slow-motion dream. Mason, or Vanessa, texted me around 6 in the evening. I recall reading the message, my hands trembling. "Meeting some coworkers for drinks. We'll be home later." My head swirled. Was he really going from office to bar, parading around in that outfit? Some part of me was furious. Another part felt a pang of helplessness. What if this was the start of something I couldn't control? I tried to keep busy, but the hours ticked by in a tense hush. When he finally came home, it was past 10 at night, and he was flushed with what looked like excitement. "Met a lot of supportive people," he said, slipping off his heels by the door. "They didn't even recognize me at first." Tiffany giggled, having waited up. "That's amazing, Dad." I just swallowed. "I'm going to bed," I said, turning away. "Tomorrow is the contest. Don't stay up too late." He didn't answer, and I didn't turn to look. I closed the bedroom door behind me, slid under the covers, and stared at the dark ceiling, my mind roiling with too many questions. Saturday morning arrived, and it was as if our house had been transformed into a backstage area. Tiffany orchestrated the final polishing touches with precision. Mason shaved any stubble on his face, ensuring the makeup would remain flawless. She insisted on another complete body wax for smooth arms and legs, which made him wince and me cringe in sympathy and frustration. By noon, Mason was no longer a hint of stubble or a trace of anything rugged. The color contacts Tiffany had purchased changed his brown eyes to a bright hazel. His nails were now painted a delicate pink. The evening gown hung in the closet, waiting for the final crowning moment. Meanwhile, Tiffany laid out my own outfit: a short black mini skirt, black tights, a well-worn leather jacket that belonged to Mason. She even handed me a studded belt. "You'll look edgy," she said. "It's a perfect contrast to Dad." I tried to muster some enthusiasm, but I felt hollow. Still, I didn't want to disappoint my daughter on what was, to her, an important day. So I squeezed into the outfit, wincing at how tight the skirt felt. The jacket smelled like Mason, and it only heightened the sense of strangeness. Finally, the moment arrived for us to leave for the contest venue. In the car, Mason insisted on driving, though wearing 4-inch heels. It took him a moment to settle in the driver's seat, adjusting the seat forward so his feet could comfortably reach the pedals. The comedic sight of him in that shimmering gown, behind the wheel of our old sedan, barely registered with me anymore. I was too numb. When we pulled up to the venue, a large hall draped with banners, I noticed a small crowd gathering outside. Several contestants, all men in dresses of various styles, were chatting and laughing among themselves. I caught sight of one or two who looked nervous, fidgeting with their wigs. Mason parked the car, stepped out carefully, and took a deep breath, shoulders squared. I felt an odd pang, almost an appreciation of how striking he looked in that shining gown. Then I shook the thought from my head. Inside, the energy was electric. Bright lights, loud music, and a swirl of color set the stage for the pageant. Tiffany guided us to a small area backstage, where the other contestants were getting ready. I heard the chatter of excited voices and the hiss of hairspray cans. Mason was beaming from ear to ear, and Tiffany whispered last-minute tips into his ear. I stood off to the side, uncertain where I fit in this bizarre new reality. Then a voice behind me spoke. "You must be Vanessa's family." I turned to see a tall, well-dressed man. He looked to be in his mid-30s with broad shoulders and an easy smile. "I'm Thomas," he introduced himself. "I run the company your husband works at." "Oh," I replied, extending a shaky hand. "Yes, I'm Mason's wife." He gave me a polite nod but seemed far more interested in searching the crowd for my husband. I noticed the flicker in his gaze when he finally spotted Mason, who was chatting with one of the organizers. Something about the way Thomas looked at him made me uncomfortable. "He's got real flair," Thomas said, half to me, half to himself. I couldn't believe my eyes when he showed up at the office yesterday. I thought it was some kind of prank, but he carried himself like he belonged in that outfit. A swirl of conflicting emotions flooded me. "Yes, well, we'll see how this goes," I said stiffly. Thomas kept his gaze on Mason. "He looks incredible." I moved away, not wanting to linger in that moment. Soon, the event began. Spotlights illuminated the stage, and one by one, contestants walked out to show off their dresses, poses, and stage presence. In the wings, I stood with Tiffany, watching Mason's turn. When he stepped out under the bright lights, the crowd erupted into applause. He held his head high, swayed his hips gracefully, and even did a playful spin that sent the shimmering fabric of his gown swirling around him. I barely recognized the confident figure up there. The applause was thunderous. I felt a swell of something akin to pride, but it was quickly shadowed by worry. The person on that stage, turning heads and capturing hearts, was technically my husband, but I couldn't reconcile the thought in my mind. The results were announced near the end of the show. Mason, or Vanessa, ended up placing second. I thought I would be relieved. I didn't know how I would handle him winning first prize, though apparently second place was nearly as glamorous. Tiffany squealed in delight, hugging him. Then, as people milled about congratulating the contestants, Thomas appeared again, this time cutting through the crowd to stand near my husband. I caught part of their conversation. "You were spectacular," Thomas said, a bright smile on his face. "Thanks," Mason replied, blinking those long, fake lashes. "I never thought I'd have such a crowd cheering for me." Thomas laid a hand gently on my husband's arm. "You should have won," he said softly. And then he looked at Mason in a way that made my skin crawl with uneasy jealousy. "I hope this isn't the last time I see you dressed like that." My husband, blushed. "Well, who knows?" he said quietly, glancing away in a gesture that seemed bashful. I didn't even notice Tiffany until she appeared at my elbow, grinning from ear to ear. "Hey, Mom," she said, grabbing my arm. "Thomas is the boss Dad told us about. Isn't he amazing? He's such a nice guy." I forced a nod. Yes, he seems nice. But inside, I was seething. Something about the way Mason and Thomas were looking at each other unsettled me. It wasn't just friendly or appreciative. There was an undertone that felt like attraction. My heart hammered, and I reminded myself to stay calm. This was just a passing fancy, nerves and excitement from the event. I tried to reassure myself, but the dread gnawing at me refused to vanish. The rest of the evening was a haze of stilted conversations, polite smiles, and photo sessions. Tiffany insisted we pose as a family. She coaxed me into standing next to Mason, who was still wearing that long evening gown, blonde hair shining under the overhead lights. I wore my mini skirt, my heavy leather jacket, and a forced smile as the camera flashed. Then Mason insisted on introducing me to Thomas, though we'd already exchanged words. "Oh, honey, this is Thomas from work," Mason said, gesturing flamboyantly with manicured nails. "He owns the company. Isn't that amazing? He came to support me." Thomas gave me a curt nod, offered some polite pleasantries, then turned his attention right back to Mason, praising him for his confidence, congratulating him on placing second. I remember stepping away, uncomfortably hot in that jacket, unsure what to do with myself. Tiffany was off talking to the other contestants, and my husband was clearly absorbed in Thomas's company. I felt invisible. We drove home later, the car filled with Tiffany's chatter, the trophies rattling in the back seat. Mason, or Vanessa, sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window with a small, content smile on his face. The entire ride, I felt like a bystander. A heavy sense of alienation weighed on me. By the time we pulled into the driveway and stepped inside, it was almost midnight. I tried to hold on to the illusion that once we were home, life would slip back to normal. Maybe this entire ordeal was just a weekend spectacle, something we'd laugh about months from now. But those hopes shattered when Mason announced a few days later that he wanted to keep his new look for a while longer. Tiffany was thrilled. She gushed over ways to style his hair, adjust his makeup, and plan new outfits. Meanwhile, I trailed behind them like a dismayed shadow. Then came the final blow. The more time Mason spent as Vanessa, the less he seemed interested in me, or in any part of our old routine. He started going out more, claiming it was about confidence, or that he had found new friends who wanted to see him in this light. I tried to argue once or twice, but Tiffany brushed off my concerns. "He's just exploring something new," she said. "Maybe it makes him happy. Don't you want Dad to be happy?" I pressed my lips together. Of course I wanted him to feel good about his life, but what about my sense of security in our marriage? One evening, Mason came home particularly late. I was in the living room, the TV glowing with some forgettable show. Tiffany had gone to bed. Mason, still in a feminine blouse and skirt, high heels dangling from his fingertips, glided into the room. He looked happy, radiant even. I noticed the faint smell of cologne on him, not his usual brand, but something distinctly masculine. My throat tightened. "Where have you been?" I asked, not bothering to hide the tired anger in my voice. He hesitated, lips slightly parted. "I met Thomas for dinner. We got talking, and time flew by." I stared at him, trying to keep my tone steady. "Dinner with your boss? Must have been interesting." A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. "We're friends. He's supportive of me." The unspoken detail in that statement lay heavily between us. Supportive of what exactly? I suspected there was more going on, and the fear lodged itself in the pit of my stomach. This was no longer just a costume, just a game. Something deeper had changed. Despite my attempts to hold the marriage together, the weeks that followed proved impossible to navigate. Mason, or Vanessa, drifted further away from me. Thomas's presence loomed in the background. My conversations with Tiffany devolved into sharp remarks and accusations. Finally, one late afternoon, I discovered that Mason had been regularly spending the night at Thomas's penthouse. He confessed it bluntly, almost as though he couldn't hide it anymore. I remember standing in the kitchen, the late sun casting a long shadow across the tiles, as he told me, "I'm going to move in with him. Thomas understands me, encourages me. I'm not sure I can be the person I used to be." My chest felt tight. "You're married," I said, voice shaking. "What about us? This is your family we're talking about." He looked at me, mascara framing his eyes, his hair styled in a sophisticated updo. "I don't belong here anymore," he said softly. "I can't keep pretending." We argued, or maybe I argued, while he calmly stated that there was no other path for him. Tiffany appeared halfway through this confrontation, tears welling up in her eyes. She insisted that Dad was following the path that felt right, and that she thought we should try to be understanding. The realization that Tiffany stood firmly on his side, Vanessa's side, shredded what was left of my composure. In the end, I collapsed onto a chair, tears burning my cheeks. He knelt next to me for a moment, placing a gentle hand on mine. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I couldn't even look at him. I remember staring at my wedding ring, my mind a thunderstorm of betrayal and loss. Hours later, he packed a few essential items, carefully folded his dresses and female wardrobe into a suitcase, and left. The front door closed behind him with a soft click, and I felt as though a piece of my life had been sliced away. In the days that followed, I tried to return to normal, though my sense of normal was shattered. The house felt emptier, despite Tiffany still living under the same roof. She grew increasingly sullen, and our conversations became stilted. I couldn't stand the sight of the leftover makeup kits that used to be scattered on the dining table, so I packed them all into a cardboard box and shoved it into the back of a closet. I found a lock of fake blonde hair in the bathroom sink one morning, and I nearly tore it to pieces. My emotions were so raw that everything from that transformation felt like a personal slight. Then Tiffany dropped the final hammer. She approached me one evening as I was sipping a cold mug of tea, my eyes puffy from crying. "Mom," she said softly, "I'm leaving." I set the mug down, the clink echoing through the silence of the kitchen. "What do you mean you're leaving?" She seemed conflicted, but resolved. "Dad wants me to move in with him and Thomas, at least for a little while. He says I can have my own space in the penthouse. It's huge, and honestly, I don't want to be here anymore. It's too tense." A lump rose in my throat. "You're my daughter. Do you have any idea what this is doing to me?" Tiffany's eyes welled with tears. "I'm sorry, Mom. Really. But I feel like Dad understands me better right now. You're so angry all the time." I wanted to lash out, to tell her that of course I was angry. My husband had left me to live in some penthouse with another man, presenting himself as Vanessa. My daughter was choosing to join them, leaving me alone to stare at the ruins of our family. Instead, I just felt exhausted. So I stood there, silent and trembling. Tiffany sniffled. "I'll come visit. This isn't goodbye forever, Mom." But it felt like it. Within the week, she too was gone, hauling suitcases out the door, casting me a sorrowful glance over her shoulder. And then I was truly alone. The evenings stretched on, and I found myself wandering from room to room in a house that had once been alive with chatter and noise. I noticed small details that tore at me. Mason's old jacket left draped over a kitchen chair, an open bottle of his aftershave, Tiffany's teenage photos pinned to the corkboard in her bedroom. I was left with ghosts of what had been. I tried to blame Tiffany for planting the seed of this transformation. I tried to blame Mason for going along with it so wholeheartedly. I tried to blame Thomas for sliding in and driving a wedge through my marriage. But the more I tried to find a single culprit, the more I realized that the entire situation was complicated. My attempts to rationalize or find a neat explanation left me feeling hollow. One rainy evening, about a month after Mason left, I sat in the living room in my pajamas, staring at the phone. I had half an urge to call him and demand he come home, but I knew, deep in my heart, that the man I married wasn't just around the corner. Even if I got him on the phone, I wouldn't be speaking to the person I used to know. He had changed in ways that I couldn't reach, and Tiffany had chosen to follow him, living in a sparkling penthouse with a man who had captured my husband's attention in a way I never could. On nights like that, the memories of the early days of our marriage haunted me. Mason was never the perfect husband, but we had been close once. We'd shared jokes, struggled over finances, dreamed of a future with traveling and raising a family. We had navigated countless little battles, always coming out the other side together. Now, that future was ashes. Sometimes I still catch glimpses of them, pictures that Tiffany posts online from time to time. She's all smiles in fancy restaurants, her father, Vanessa, next to her, beaming in a sleek dress, Thomas standing at his side with a hand lightly placed on Vanessa's waist. The old Mason is nowhere to be found. People ask me how I'm holding up, and I give them a forced smile saying, "I'm okay," or "I'm managing." Truth is, it burns every time I see my husband photographed in the arms of another man, both of them dressed in glamorous outfits, living a life that's both foreign and bizarre to me. Where do I even go from here? I sometimes try to reflect on whether I could have prevented this. If I had vehemently refused to let Tiffany rope her dad into that contest, would it have made a difference? Maybe. Or maybe Vanessa was there all along, waiting for an opportunity to emerge, waiting for someone like Thomas to come along and awaken a whole different side of him. It's a question that keeps me up at night, even now. Occasionally, Tiffany texts me. She tells me she's all right, that her father is doing well, that Thomas is good to them both. She says that if I'm ever ready, they'd like to have me over for dinner to show me their new life, to show me that there's no reason to hate them. I never respond. I can't face them. Maybe one day I will, but not yet. What started as a silly contest, something I thought we'd forget about in a week, spiraled into the complete unraveling of my world. I've learned to accept the silence of the house. I fill my time with work, errands, and small tasks that keep my hands busy so my mind won't wander down dark paths. But the emptiness is still there when the lights go out. When I think back to that moment, Mason on stage, swirling in a gown, the crowd cheering, Tiffany beaming by my side, I replay it in my head. If I had known that was the turning point, I might have said something, done something differently. But life doesn't give you neon signs when things are about to change forever. It just happens, and you're left to pick up the pieces. At least that's what I've been doing, collecting the fragments of the life I once had. Some days, I feel hopeful that eventually I'll build something new. Other days, the hurt feels as raw as the day he walked out. But either way, my house is quieter now, my bed colder, and every so often, I still find a stray hair extension on the bathroom floor. I pick it up, stare at it for a moment, and drop it in the trash, as if discarding a small remnant of a dream I once thought was unbreakable. I doubt I'll ever fully understand the reasons behind all of this. I doubt Mason will ever again be the person I knew, or that we'll share the same life we used to. But in the quiet hours of the morning, when the sun is just rising and I lie awake, I realize that what happened can't be taken back. We're all different people now. Whether I like it or not, that's the reality. Sometimes I play over the memories. Tiffany's excitement when she first showed me the contest flyer, Mason's laughter as he teased her boyfriend about participating, the fleeting grin on my husband's face when he said, "If you don't do it, maybe I will." If I could go back in time, I'd warn him and myself about what was to come. But time marches on, ignoring regrets. Life is strange. One morning you wake up thinking the day will unfold with routine predictability, and by sunset your family is shattered. I'm living proof of that. I don't know if I'll ever find peace with what happened. I only know that day by day, I continue to exist, to eat, to sleep, to pay bills, to go to work, and to come home to a house that is far too silent. In fleeting moments of clarity, I remind myself that I'm not alone in experiencing heartbreak or betrayal. Other people's worlds collapse too, sometimes in ways just as shocking. Still, it's a hollow comfort. When I see the space in my closet where Mason's clothes used to hang, my old leather jacket missing, replaced by an empty hanger, I'm reminded that he chose to leave, with or without my permission. Sometimes I imagine them in that penthouse. Tiffany might be sitting with a warm cup of tea telling her father about her day. Thomas might walk in, greet Vanessa with a gentle kiss on the cheek, and the three of them might discuss dinner plans. A bizarre domestic image that, not so long ago, would have seemed impossible. Yet that's the life they lead now. I close my eyes and press my hands to my temples, trying to push away the pictures swirling in my mind. The man who used to stand in our living room, calling me hon and making me coffee, is gone. In his place stands a graceful figure with painted nails and blonde hair, calling himself Vanessa, forging new connections in a world I barely recognize. Occasionally, a wave of anger surges in me. I want to scream, hurl accusations at the walls for letting him slip away, but the anger always subsides, leaving me with just sorrow. It feels pointless to scream in an empty house. That sense of sorrow became permanent for a while. I isolated myself from friends and relatives, afraid they'd ask too many questions. I didn't want to see their pitying expressions. I came up with excuses for why Mason wasn't around. But rumors spread, and soon enough, people either guessed or heard the real story. Some found it scandalous, others found it intriguing, but either way, nobody could fix it for me. Months later, Tiffany stopped by unexpectedly. She knocked on the door, and when I opened it, I almost didn't recognize her. She wore a stylish blazer, had her hair swept up in a neat ponytail, and looked more mature somehow. She stepped inside, set her purse down, and gave me a cautious hug. I froze for a moment, then slowly returned the embrace. She spoke about her life at the penthouse. I stood there, numb, half listening. She talked about how Dad was adjusting to his new role. She said that Thomas was not just a romantic interest, but also a mentor, helping Dad, Vanessa, navigate new opportunities at the company. She explained that the city could be surprisingly welcoming to someone like Vanessa, who found confidence in wearing dresses and presenting a different side of who they were. I tried not to flinch at the mention of Vanessa, that name that had turned my household upside down. Tiffany noticed my tension because she reached out and placed a hand on mine. "Mom," she said softly, "I'm sorry if it feels like I chose him over you." "You did, though," I said, staring at the worn carpet. "You left." Her voice trembled. "I know, and I can't take that back. But it's not as if you needed me around. We barely spoke to each other. The house was suffocating. Dad needed support, and so did I." I couldn't find words to respond. Instead, I thought of the nights I spent alone, curled up in bed, missing them both yet unable to say it. She left a few hours later, promising she'd visit again, promising that the door was always open if I wanted to see them. After she went, I remained on the couch, staring at the empty spot where she had sat. My tears felt strangely calm, a resigned kind of sorrow. And so life goes on in a broken pattern. I breathe in, breathe out, keep myself afloat with day-to-day tasks. My husband, Vanessa, lives with Thomas in a luxurious penthouse, wearing dresses and a blonde hairstyle. My daughter lives alongside them, loyal and bright-eyed, forging a new family unit under that expensive rooftop. I remain in the old family home, surrounded by quiet reminders of what once was. I sometimes wonder if I'll ever gather the courage to drive to that penthouse, ride the elevator up, and face them all. Perhaps stand in the gleaming living room, see Mason, Vanessa, smiling in a sophisticated outfit, with Thomas's hand resting at the small of his back, while Tiffany stands near them, the picture of comfort and belonging. How would I feel then? Nauseated, grief-stricken, or maybe a strange sense of relief that I can finally see with my own eyes how much has changed. But for now, I'm not ready. My nights remain spent in uneasy quiet, my days in a routine haze. The memory of that contest, of Tiffany's excited face urging her father to enter, replays in my head like a haunting echo. I still ask myself, how did everything unravel from one simple event? Yet I know deep down that it wasn't simple at all. It was a crack in the foundation that turned into a fracture no one could seal. The finality is what stings most. Vanessa has made it clear that Mason isn't coming back. My daughter sees this all as a natural progression of some path that was inevitable, and I'm left with recollections of a man who was once my companion, who made me laugh, who kept me company on lazy Sunday mornings, who was the father of my child. Now, that same person floats in a realm I can't touch. Late at night, when exhaustion makes me brutally honest with myself, I acknowledge that I cannot rewind time. I can't forbid Tiffany from entering her father in that contest. I can't force my husband to remain in a life where he felt restricted. And I can't bring myself to smile politely at Thomas and pretend I'm fine with any of this. So I exist in this limbo, forging ahead alone, uncertain of what the future holds. That's the shape of my life now. An empty house, a once shared closet missing half its clothes, and an ache that throbs whenever I see a flicker of blonde hair in a magazine or a music video. Sometimes the ache is manageable, other times it presses in on me until I gasp for air. But I survive each day, uncertain if peace lies ahead or if this will remain an open wound forever. Perhaps one day, I'll find some steady ground again, make new friends, fill my schedule, maybe even allow myself a genuine laugh that isn't tainted by old memories. But that day still feels distant. For now, I'm here, living with the aftermath of that fateful contest that upended my world. A part of me will always resent that flyer Tiffany held. Another part will always hold on to the memory of Mason as the person I thought I knew. Maybe both of those feelings will soften over time, melding into something I can bear. But for now, I'm learning to carry them as best I can, step by step, breath by breath, in the quiet, lonely halls of the home that used to be ours.
Did you like the story? Hit that like button and tell me what you thought in the comments. Do you want to hear more stories? Subscribe and hit the bell. For exclusive content and early access, check out our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, or you can watch any of the videos shown on my right. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.